Hey, good morning everyone. A Tuesday morning, 30th of June 2020. This morning's devotion has a look at Colossians chapter 3 verse 13, and I'll read it. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. In other words, we need to make allowances for each other's faults. We need to forgive those who offend us. And we need to remember that God has forgiven us. So we also need to forgive others as God has forgiven us. We are to forgive because we have been forgiven. Well, technically speaking, it is true. But the question arises, how often do we actually forgive? God expects us to show grace to others because He has shown His grace to us. And He did this by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. And Paul writes about this in Romans chapter 5. It is easier to be selfish instead of being gracious. Month end, you see a slow cashier in the grocery store as a 5 or even 10-minute interruption to your busy day. But we don't take into account that perhaps this person may have received some very bad news that has just upset their day, perhaps the death of a loved one. On the home front, we may even view a family member who is struggling as a constant drain on our emotions and on our resources, instead of siding up with them and encouraging them because they may be struggling with a situation in life. When we're driving, we may get someone who cuts in front of us, and we immediately offer all sorts of waving gestures which are not very nice, and other verbal words which, let's not speak about those. But have we ever considered what is happening in that person's life? Granted, maybe it's arrogance, but sometimes there's a deeper reason. We need to be more considerate. We need to forgive, just as we have been forgiven. We are all in need of God's love. People often ask me, how can I find the strength to forgive? Because they say, I just don't have the strength. Well, neither do I. I cannot do it on my own. The only place where I can remember where I receive strength to forgive others is through the forgiveness and the grace of God, and by remembering how much God has actually forgiven me. If God really wanted to, He could haul out that book, which will be longer and thicker than my arm. And I tell you, I would be doomed forever. So the reminder to us is that we need to remember how much God has forgiven us. We may sometimes even be reminded through loved ones or friends of a particularly cruel thing that happened to us many years ago. And they may ask, don't you remember when so-and-so did that to you? Well, maybe, maybe not. But our reply should be, no, I distinctly remember forgetting it. Forgiveness does not mean that the person who has wronged you was right. And it does not make what the person did to you okay. You can forgive them still, because each one will still have to face the consequences for what they did. When it seems impossible to forgive someone, we need to remember one thing. Jesus forgave you as He hung on that cross, bleeding, dying. He even said to those who were around the cross, He said to them, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. My dear friends, may we find the grace of God in our lives to forgive those who have intentionally or even unintentionally hurt us. May we always err on the side of grace. May we continue forgiving them, that we may be healed through the forgiveness that Christ offers us. May the Lord be with you. May He bless you. May He cause His face to shine upon you and be with you always. Goodbye.